Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, love triangle. No matter what the past experience was, new relationships are a clean slate. They offer fresh emotions and stir excitement. One has every chance to succeed where they might have failed in a previous union. However, emerging infatuation not only carries romance but sometimes also big problems. When choosing a life partner, you surely do not know what baggage they carry behind them. It happens that along with newfound feelings, you inadvertently take on burdens that should have been avoided. An example of this can be the so-called love triangle, known for its sharply defined angles. Horrific discovery. On October 5th, 2017, on the waterfront of the suburb of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, USA, law enforcement officers discovered the body of a man. The found body was wrapped in a tarpaulin, strapped with belts on both sides. This grim discovery was located at the bottom of a trash container of a local supermarket. During the autopsy, it was determined that the victim had received multiple blunt force hits and knife wounds. Apparently, the man had been beaten over a long period. During the assault, the unfortunate man had his jaw broken and teeth knocked out, some of which ended up in his respiratory tract. Most of the bones in the face and head were broken. Only on the skull were 6 wounds inflicted by a blunt object noted. Additionally, 6 knife wounds were found on the neck, 7 in the throat area, and several more in the upper part of the chest. The injuries were so severe that in some places the flesh was cut through. Ultimately, the medical examiners concluded that death was due to head trauma, blood loss, and suffocation. The identity of the deceased was beyond doubt, further confirmed by the victim's brother. On the pathologist's table lay 39-year-old Nicholas Wilcox from Putnam, Connecticut. What events led this young man to such a tragic end, and whether his tormentors were punished, we will learn in today's criminal story. Introduction to the main characters. In the subsequent investigation of Nick's demise, several individuals were suspected: his girlfriend Isabella Tagliarini and her former boyfriend Eric Robinson. Both were also his neighbors in the duplex where our story's protagonist had moved. The house is designed for 2 families and features separate rooms, each with its own yard and entrance, a popular type of property in Florida. Initially, Robinson, who had first rented the place, sublet the vacant units. 38-year-old Isabella was the first person he invited over. She was from Brazil, where she worked as a flight attendant for a national airline. In 2010, Tagliarini divorced and immigrated to the U.S. with her children. She successfully married an American, which helped her secure the coveted green card. The marriage lasted until 2016, but over time, their passionate feelings faded, leading to their separation. That same year, the young woman began dating 46-year-old Eric Robinson. Her new partner was from a small town in Massachusetts, had never been married, and had no children. A romantic relationship quickly developed between them, though it was periodically turbulent. The passionate nature of Isabella and Eric's accustomed bachelor lifestyle contributed to this. Moreover, according to the woman, he was inconsistent in showing his feelings. He could be cheerful and friendly, then suddenly become gloomy and aggressive. For this reason, the couple broke up and got back together multiple times. In June 2017, shortly before Nicholas moved in, the lovers had separated again. Wilcox had known the couple for about 6 months and maintained contact with them. When he mentioned wanting to save on rent, Robinson offered him to move in and share the expenses. Initially, the neighbors had a wonderful relationship. They respected each other's personal space, yet often spent time together. However, over time, this neighborly idyll was disrupted, and problems began. As it turned out, Robinson was using and storing banned substances, which explained his erratic behavior and mood swings. On August 23, 2017, the man was detained. Shortly before this, he had reconciled with Isabella and was actually in a relationship with her at the time of his arrest. By then, Nicholas had already been living with them under the same roof. After Eric's detention, none of the tenants knew when the main renter would return, nor what their future held. It was possible they could be evicted at any time. Therefore, they immersed themselves in work to have a financial safety net in case of emergency. Fortunately for Nick, there was plenty of work, which was not the case for Isabella. The woman struggled to find suitable employment, so she began helping her neighbor in the construction business. The life story of Nicholas. It's worth noting that several generations of the Wilcox family engaged in similar activities. Nicholas's grandfather was a fisherman and built boats, and his father also dedicated his life to construction. Later, the main character joined the family business, becoming a roofer after graduating from school in 1996. Along with his older brother Donald, they acted as contractors, building their own client base. At the age of 23, Nick started a family. The young man tied his life to a girl named Kathy, who was his classmate in his senior year. A year later, the couple had a daughter, and 3 years after that, twins. Throughout this time, the family had worked diligently, striving to provide a decent living for his loved ones. Friends and acquaintances of Nick recalled that despite his busy schedule, he was a devoted husband and father. Yet he devoted a lot of time to his professional pursuits. Perhaps this was the reason for the family's eventual dissolution. The divorce occurred shortly after the birth of the younger children. Nonetheless, the father continued to communicate and support his family. A fresh start. At the beginning of 2017, following his brother, Nicholas moved to Florida. The new place promised better job opportunities. Here, the number of clients significantly increased. Additionally, the chosen method of earning became non-seasonal. Almost all year round, the state enjoyed good weather, warm and sunny, which creates excellent conditions not only for living, but also for business development. Moreover, the Wilcox profession came in handy in the new location, where powerful hurricanes regularly swept through the coastal areas. During storm season, homes were damaged and thus needed to be reinforced and repaired after the bad weather. Leaving his family back in Connecticut, Nicholas continued to care for his children from a distance. According to an agreement with his ex-wife, he sent them money and visited whenever possible. Initially, the man stayed in a multi-apartment complex in Fort Lauderdale. However, he later had to move to the suburbs to reduce his housing expenses. Irma. It was during this time that life brought him together with Isabella Tagliarini. The hurricane season had started, so Nick was inundated with daily orders. At that time, Hurricane Irma was approaching the area where the hero lived and worked. It turned into a powerful Atlantic tropical cyclone of Category 5, with wind speeds of about 177 miles per hour. An emergency was declared before its arrival. About 7 million people were evacuated from coastal areas. Nicholas spent all his time preparing buildings for the impending assault of the elements. He reinforced homes, boarded up windows and doors, and afterward was involved in clearing the resulting debris. Of course, all this was his main job, so he was paid for it, but he could not be called mercenary. In an interview, the man's older brother confessed that Nick never refused to help. One September day in 2017, as all of Florida was preparing for the terrible cyclone, Nicholas was busy boarding up windows with plywood. Soon there was a sharp shortage in stores, creating long lines. In one of these lines, a woman named Pamela approached Nick. She told him that she lacked building materials to fortify her home. In response, the younger Wilcox promised to solve this problem, and that same evening brought her the 7 missing sheets of plywood. He boarded up all the doors and windows of the woman's house and refused payment, even though he spent an entire day finding the necessary supplies. Nick was moved by Pamela's difficult life situation. She was left alone with children and needed outside help. In response, the woman thanked her rescuer. Heated romance. The hurricane brought widespread destruction, providing Nick with work for a long time. As a result, he decided to make his duplex neighbor his assistant. Isabella's duties included cleaning up after the projects were completed and handing tools during the work. As the young people spent a lot of time together, their friendly relations evolved into a romantic relationship. On September 3rd, the couple made a peculiar vow, written in blood and on paper, which served as a sort of engagement and a promise for a long and happy life filled with lots of children. Despite the strong feelings that enveloped the lovers, their union could not be called perfect. Almost immediately, minor issues and disagreements began. Arguments arose out of nowhere. On September 22nd, a serious conflict occurred between Nicholas and Isabella. The woman even left home and spent the night in a hotel. However, the next morning, the couple reconciled. According to Tagliarini, she lacked attention and respect from the man. He, on the other hand, thought she was exaggerating. Ultimately, their love led to inevitable consequences. The message. On October 5th, 2017, a man called the local police. During the conversation, he introduced himself as Isabella's former husband and asked the law enforcement officers to contact her. According to his words, she had information about a recent crime. The caller did not provide any more details. Despite the strangeness of the call, the police immediately responded to the message and called Tagliarini. From her voice, it was clear that the woman was hysterical. When asked by the police what had happened, she replied that everything was fine. The only thing that concerned her at that moment was a fight with her beloved man. She explained that he had left her and driven off in an unknown direction. However, when the police mentioned the call from her former husband, she immediately changed her tone. The woman began to cry and confessed that her beloved had not gone anywhere, but was dead. She also added that she knew where the body was located and was ready to show it. Crime scene. Law enforcement arrived at the address provided by Isabella. The officers were met with a house, all of whose windows and doors were boarded up with plywood, apparently in preparation for the approaching hurricane. Inside, there was a strong smell of cleaning agents and paint, indicating that the place had been thoroughly cleaned. In one of the bedrooms, detectives noticed the walls and floor had been hastily and sloppily painted, likely in an attempt to cover something up rather than for a routine renovation. Their suspicions were confirmed by the discovery of hydrogen peroxide containers. Small blood stains were found on the bedding and the bedside table. It was also evident that someone had replaced the old mattress. Despite efforts to eliminate and paint over them, bloodstains were everywhere. The police suspected that the room had been the site of a violent crime, which Tagliarini had tried to clean up but hadn't completed in time, thanks to her ex-husband's timely call. Isabella was found inside the duplex, appearing distressed. During the conversation, she explained her state by saying she had been under the influence of a sedative during the phone call, which accounted for her unusual behavior. However, she confirmed knowing what had happened there and where the body was located. The unstable woman was decided to be taken to the station. By this time, the police had spoken again with her ex, who provided a partial account of the events. According to him, she had called him and told him about the crime. Initial version. Nevertheless, during the interrogation, the Brazilian woman claimed that Eric Robinson, her former boyfriend, was involved in the crime. On October 5th, around 2 a.m., the man came to the duplex and found the couple asleep. He was enraged by a vow hanging above the bed's headboard in the bedroom. He woke Isabella by putting a knife to her throat to prevent her from screaming. At that moment, she looked at Nick lying beside her, who seemed to be struggling to breathe. However, Eric did not allow her to see more and pushed her out of the bedroom. He then took a brass knuckle and a bat and began to beat the defenseless man. After finishing the beating, Robinson wrapped the body in a tarp and secured it with straps. Under the threat of a similar fate, his girlfriend helped him dispose of the body. However, the detectives were puzzled as to why, instead of calling the police, she had called her ex-husband. Isabella explained that she was very frightened and was looking for support and advice. According to her, the criminal also forced her to clean up the residence and eliminate all traces. Afterwards, he returned the phone he had taken earlier and left. Her confession raised doubts and required verification. Additionally, visible bruises and abrasions were noted on Tagliarini's body, which she explained were from being beaten by Eric after Nicholas's death. Investigation. The officers began their investigation by searching for the victim and his assailant. The suspect indicated where her boyfriend was hidden. While the medical examiners worked on the body, forensic specialists arrived at the scene. Meanwhile, law enforcement was busy searching for Eric. It was established that the man had been released from prison on October 3rd and was living at a different address. During this time, the criminal had met a new woman named Merida, at whose place he was staying. She told the police that on the night of October 5th, her boyfriend received a phone call after which he immediately left. He returned around 5 a.m., packed his things, and set off again without any explanation. When asked if she noticed any bloodstains on her boyfriend's clothes, Merida explained that she hadn't seen anything suspicious. Robinson was found around 8 p.m., 4 miles away from the house. He refused to cooperate with the investigation, and therefore, he was taken into custody pending further investigation. Eric's version. During the interrogation, Eric provided a story that differed from Isabella's version. According to his statement, Tagliarini contacted him on the night of October 5th, despite a restraining order she had received against him immediately after he was sent to prison. Despite this, she told him that she had attacked Nicholas under the influence of banned substances and ended his life. When Isabella came to her senses, she realized she couldn't manage the situation alone and asked for help. In return, the Brazilian woman promised Robinson that they would get back together and start over. As Eric still had strong feelings for her, he agreed to these terms. Fiery Brazilian. Detectives latched onto the man's words, wanting to interview the initial suspect once again. Given the circumstances and her behavior, it was clear that she was holding back information. Most likely, she was trying to minimize her role in the incident. Moreover, the investigation uncovered intriguing information. It turned out the woman was far from innocent and had been on the police radar multiple times. On September 22nd, when Nick and Isabella had a severe argument, it escalated beyond the confines of their room. Under the influence of Xanax and banned substances, she became enraged and destroyed some of her partner's belongings. Unfortunately, she also damaged his work vehicle. Consequently, the angered man felt compelled to contact the police. Moreover, she behaved so irrationally that he genuinely feared for his life. As known, the couple reconciled the following morning, and Nick withdrew his complaint. After this, investigators spoke with the suspect's ex-husband. He described Isabella as having an explosive personality and a fiery temperament. He also learned that during their argument, Wilcox had warned her. He threatened to contact immigration services if such incidents repeated. Nicholas informed her that he would give her a negative reference, which could impact her future significantly. For Tagliarini, the opportunity to live in the U.S. was paramount, so the fear of deportation was catastrophic. Could it be that during another argument, Isabella reacted explosively again and found herself under threat? It was quite plausible that her desire to stay in America could have motivated a subsequent crime. Not wanting to rely solely on existing statements, detectives began interviewing those close to the involved parties. An important witness turned out to be a neighbor of the young couple. Her windows overlooked the courtyard of the duplex. She stated that she saw Robinson arrive in his car on the night of the crime. He then took some tools and trash bags, and shortly thereafter, he got back in his car and left. The investigation continues. With substantial evidence gathered in the case, Tagliarini was called in for another interrogation on October 11th. At that time, the woman had not been arrested, so she came to the station voluntarily. Thanks to video surveillance footage, detectives established that on the fateful night, she personally transported Nick's body and disposed of it in a trash container. During this, the Brazilian was neither frightened nor agitated. She acted calmly and methodically, making decisions independently. That night, she indeed met with Eric Robinson, but she was relaxed and friendly. At the same time, no one took her mobile phone, and she purchased the items needed for emergency repairs herself. In response, she began to change her story, adding new details about the events. Isabella insisted that it was Eric who had threatened her with either murder or deportation along with her children. She claimed that she was forced to act as she did because of these threats. Although her statement sounded plausible, the investigators were cautious with their conclusions. Both Robinson and Tagliarini's backgrounds raised suspicions. Eric also had a turbulent past. He first caught police attention in 2001, mainly for possession and distribution of narcotics. At the same time, Isabella had every reason to fear him. In August 2016, he committed an aggravated assault against a woman. In June 2017, he was caught for strangulation, and in the same year, for possession of substances. Neighbors reported being afraid of the man and tried to avoid him due to his aggressive and erratic behavior. The next interrogation of the Brazilian woman took place on October 14th. Despite her claims of not having touched Nick, experts found traces of her DNA on the man's body, thus contradicting her statements. According to the investigation, she participated in the violent crime against her lover, at least in the disposal of the body and the elimination of evidence. However, neither suspect admitted to any wrongdoing. While Robinson was held in custody, Isabella was briefly detained before being released to await trial. Everyone was anticipating the start of the court proceedings. However, due to various complications and delays, the trial did not take place until 5 years later. The significant delay was caused by the outbreak of COVID-19 and a series of bureaucratic snags. During this time, the prosecution clearly formed its strategy and tactics, while the defense thoroughly reviewed all information gathered during the investigation. Additionally, during this period, another significant piece of evidence was uncovered. The prosecution managed to recover Robinson's deleted social media account, which he had used to discuss the crime against his former friend. Over these years, Isabella made a plea deal with the prosecution, admitting guilt to a lesser charge. In exchange for a lighter sentence, she agreed to testify against Eric. Sentencing. On April 10, 2023, the trial of Eric Robinson finally took place. The prosecution argued that he was solely responsible for the crime against Nicholas. Isabella's role was not presented as that of a co-conspirator, but as a witness who tampered with evidence and helped eliminate traces, which is also criminally punishable. Legal complexities caused several hearing cancellations, and the trial resumed after a week. Throughout the trial, Robinson was charged with premeditated murder. Despite Tagliarini providing inconsistent testimonies and contradicting herself, her attorney maintained her innocence. The prosecution focused on witness statements that described Eric's unusual actions on the night of the crime. To avoid GPS tracking, the accused used his new girlfriend's car, which was not equipped with satellite tracking, and he also left his mobile phone at home. Meanwhile, other case details were not concealed. It became known that after the crime, Isabella and Eric had an intimate encounter in the next room. She explained her condition by stating she was under the influence of strong sedatives and also feared for her life. After hearing both sides, it became clear that jealousy was the motive for the brutal and senseless murder of Wilcox. While Isabella claimed that she had ended the relationship, Eric still considered her his girlfriend. Upon his release, the accused returned home, but the changes that had occurred in the meantime fueled his rage and hatred. During this period, he plotted revenge against his rival and committed a cold-blooded attack while the couple was most vulnerable in their sleep. His first strike effectively sealed the fate of his former friend. He then attempted to dispose of the evidence by scattering it in various locations. The murder weapon was found in a landfill. The deceased man's body was wrapped in tarpaulin and hidden in a trash container. Afterwards, Isabella painted over blood-splattered walls and cleaned the area. Throughout these actions, Eric communicated with Isabella and directed her actions. Eventually, 51-year-old Robinson was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for second-degree murder. Isabella Tagliarini was found guilty of aiding the criminal, but threats and coercion were considered mitigating circumstances. She received a suspended sentence and is on probation until 2026. Remarkably, the convicted woman was indeed ready to do anything for U.S. citizenship. It was revealed that 10 days after Robinson was incarcerated, the parties signed another pledge. In it, Eric promised to marry Isabella, but he did not manage to do so. She was prepared to marry him shortly after he dealt with her lover. It appears that this unprincipled woman is indifferent about whom she marries. The main thing is to maintain her status. All men Isabella Tagliarini has been involved with were used for her selfish purposes and, in one way or another, were inclined toward marriage. Apparently, for her, nothing is more important than American citizenship, even if it comes at any price. To summarize this story, one might say, opportunity in life isn't singular, but life itself is. Unfortunately, some characters in this tale never realized this, while others did but much too late. Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe to my channel. There are many shocking stories ahead of you.